Thank you, everyone, for joining me on this live Zoom town hall. We're doing it for Zateo today. It's Monday. You'll never guess what is tomorrow. I bet you have no idea what we're talking about, what's happening tomorrow. It is the presidential election, a very, very close election, if the polls are to be believed. I know a lot of you at home have been very upset this year with the Democratic Party. We hear you, we see you in the comments and the replies on Instagram, in the emails. People are understandably outraged over the Democratic Party's support for what Israel is doing in Gaza. A lot of you are saying you're going to stay at home, vote third party, even vote Trump to punish the Democrats. We thought it would be great to have an eve of election conversation with a House Democrat, a top House Democrat. Congresswoman Jayapal joins me for this conversation today. She's chair of the House Progressive Caucus. She's a member of the 7th District from Washington State. She's one of the earliest voices to come out for a ceasefire in Gaza and for conditions on military aid to Israel. She is a critic of her party's policy and her administration's policy on this issue, but she is telling people to vote for Harris and Walz tomorrow. So we thought, why not have the conversation, allow you to put your questions to the Congresswoman about why people should vote for the Democrats, even if they have understandable outrage and anger over Gaza. Congresswoman, thank you so much for joining us at Zateo for this conversation.
Thank you so much, Mehdi, for having me. I think it's such an important conversation, and I appreciate the opportunity.
So you came back from Michigan last night, I believe. You've been to Michigan a few times. This is this crucial swing state with a very big Arab American, very big Muslim American population. What are you hearing and seeing on the ground? And what's your message to people in Michigan?
Yeah, I've been meeting with Arab and Muslim voters. I've been meeting with young people in Michigan, in Georgia, Pennsylvania. These are all swing states, Wisconsin, where there are significant blocks of people, and it matters if they vote for Donald Trump or they vote for a third-party candidate or they don't vote. We could lose those states. And I feel like, as somebody who has really been in the trenches here on this issue, it has been important for me to go and listen to where people are, to hear the pain and the anger, which of course we've been hearing all year. But I think just to really have a conversation with people about what is the best way, in my view, to build sustained power. Because at the end of the day, I don't think this war is going to stop the day after the election, no matter who is elected. And what we need to do is build actual sustained power for Muslim and Arab voters and for pro-peace voters. My relationship with this community goes back to after 9/11, when I sued the Bush administration around the deportation of Muslims, and we won when we were trying to get Arab Americans out of secret detentions, thanks to the Bush administration, and we were able to do that. And so I deeply understand and want to remind myself over and over again how difficult this choice is. I don't think anyone's coming to it easily, and I feel like I have to say that because at the end of the day, there may be people who still listen to this and decide that they're going to do what they're going to do. But the best case that I want to make is that if we are to build a stronger movement, because like it or not, Arab American and Muslim voters alone do not have the power to change the course of U.S. policy towards Israel. What we do need to do is build a coalition with a lot of allies. And if we want to do that, we have to think about who is the person that is going to allow us to do that organizing? Where is the fertile ground going to be? Because there are many of us within the Democratic Party who are pushing for a change in policy, but under a Donald Trump administration, we will not have that opportunity. There's not a single person in the Republican Party who even disagrees with what Netanyahu is doing, whereas in the Democratic Party, we do. That fertile ground is best seeded under SEED, under Kamala Harris. And I think we can go into a lot more of the detail, but that is one of the big things that we are talking about. And a vote for a third-party candidate right now, I think we should get into that in more detail, but a vote for a third-party candidate right now is a vote for Donald Trump. Staying home is a vote for Donald Trump.
I'm sure we're going to get to the third-party candidate issue. Just on what you said, I always find it fascinating that every single member of Congress in the House and the Senate who has called for a ceasefire is a Democrat. Not a single Republican could bring themselves to call for a ceasefire. Not even Thomas Massey, great critic of Israel. Folks, there's almost 200 of you in the chat. Please do stick your questions in the Q&A. I'll try and get through as many questions. And by the way, to the Congresswoman and to you watching at home, the reason I'm looking down is not because I'm being rude. I'm reading questions. There's lots of questions in the chat. I'm trying to get it. I've got some lined up, but before I get to the chat, one more question from me, Congresswoman, and then I'll take some questions from our Zateo subscribers. People say, and you've heard this, why would we vote to stop a genocide by voting for the candidate who is currently enabling the genocide. That is illogical, they say. What would you say to them?
What I would say is, first of all, she is the vice president, not the president. And the president, and I've been very public about this, has the wrong policy towards Israel, but he is still the president. She can't just unilaterally change it. Secondly, I would say that she has been far more clear about what she intends to do after. I'm not making promises here. I'm saying that the things she has said, going back to 2 months after October 7th, 2023, she was in Dubai in December of 2023. And she made a very important speech as vice president that didn't get as much attention as I think it should have, because again, she's not driving policy. It's the president that's driving policy. And in that speech, she made it clear that, for example, she would not tolerate the forced displacement of Gazans. She would not tolerate the evacuation of Palestinians from Gaza. She made it clear that she is interested in reconstructing and rebuilding. And yesterday in Lansing, Michigan, I thought she came the closest to, again, saying that she would enforce domestic law. Now, I've been trying to get her to say it much more clearly. Obviously, I have not been successful at that, but I do feel like there have been many signs that show us where she is. And you have to contrast that with Donald Trump. Donald Trump is the guy that in his first 4 years, when he was president, he's the one who moved the embassy to Jerusalem. He is the one who empowered Netanyahu to expand settlements. He even put a U.S. ambassador to Israel in who has monetary interests in settlement expansion. He is the one that left Palestinians out of all negotiations. And this time around, he has been the one who said to Netanyahu, finish the job, do whatever you want. A second Donald Trump presidency will be a blank check. And as you said, and as I said earlier, not a single Republican who is going to oppose him, because not a single Republican has to date. The only movement of opposition to current U.S. policy comes from Democrats. So we will be completely destroyed as we try to push that forward.
Let me half agree with you. The current opposition does come from Democrats. It comes from Democrats like yourself, or Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez, or Congresswoman Omar, Congressman Castro, and others. It doesn't come from this administration. When you talk about a blank check, this administration has already given Netanyahu a blank check. Let's be clear, he has gotten everything he's wanted from the United States. And I want to bring in Chuck McKnight, who asks a very powerful, heartful question. He says, I want to believe Harris can be moved to condemn Israel's genocide and call for an arms embargo, but I can't understand why any person of conscience wouldn't have already done so. She says, how Israel defends itself matters, yet the atrocities are plain to see. What more will it practically take to sway her?
I think it'll take her becoming president. And when she is actually there in the presidency, and then we build a powerful movement. I'll tell you, one of the big allies, I'm hoping that we can get to be very loud on this, because I know it matters. It's one of the top issues, is the Black community, the civil rights community. There are people across the Black community. And until she became the nominee, which I think, you know, as a Black woman being the nominee, this is a place where people are very excited about all the other things, not this issue in particular. And so they are voting for her, but I think they will be extremely powerful allies for us. And when she is president, she won't be able to hide behind the fact that she's not the president right now. She doesn't control foreign policy, some of the things that she has been saying. If we can make this a really big win, Mehdi, and it's not close, that will also help us, because the narrower the margin, the easier it is for her or for anyone else to hide in, you know, sort of it's a thin margin. The country's divided. I can't do things that are divisive. I don't personally see changing U.S. policy towards Israel and enforcing our domestic laws and stopping sending military weapons over to kill people in Gaza and in Lebanon. I don't see that as controversial, but obviously there are a lot of special interests that are very deeply entrenched in this.
We've got a lot of questions coming in. Some of them, I can answer this one. Karen D says, will you ask Kamala Harris to stop sending weapons to Israel? The Congresswoman has done that and voted for that, to be fair to her.
Multiple times.
Multiple times. Let me bring in, this is a good question from, where did it go? Oh, so let's get into third-party stuff. Rosie Mohana says, why do people think it's okay to vote shame us? Why didn't the Democrats wake up after a year of genocide and stand up and speak out and take action? Where is their moral high ground to vote shame us? Do you think vote shaming works, Congresswoman, telling people, well, you're to blame if Trump gets elected, which Vice President Harris has done and occasionally in rallies. I think she's stopped doing it recently, but she did do it on one occasion.
I don't think so. And, you know, I've never thought this. Actually, Democrats have done this to progressives for a long time, right? Of course you're going to vote this way. Are you stupid? Don't you know that this is going to be better than the alternative? I hate that. I don't think it works. And I also think it's wrong. I mean, people, particularly on this issue, Mehdi, actually on most issues that we're vote shamed about, these are deep moral questions. And I think for a lot of people, they've lost, I mean, I've been listening. People have been losing dozens of family members, right? Trying to get their families to safety, digging people out of rubble. And even for those who don't have family members, watching the horrific scenes of what is happening in Gaza and Lebanon and the West Bank. And so it feels untenable that anybody would allow that to continue. And when the United States actually has leverage to be able to say, we're not going to send you those weapons, full stop, you can't do it. And they won't be able to continue without the US military support. And so I do think it's important just to be real about how deep this is. And at the same time, to think about what gets us there. Because when people talk about punishment of Democrats and this administration and, you know, Harris and Democrats more generally, believe me, I get it. I'm not, I understand that instinct, but I just want to play it out and think about if you do that, if your sole purpose is to punish Democrats by staying out or voting third party or voting for Trump, let's just play it out and see if it gets us to a place where you're going to stop the killing and where you're going to protect the people here in this country that you need to be able to build that more powerful movement to stop this.
I'm sure you get this question a lot when you're traveling in places like Michigan, but Salwa Kadri asks, what about the influence of AIPAC? It doesn't matter who we vote for. There is a resignation among a lot of people that no matter who you vote for, Congress is Congress. It's blindly pro-Israel. You get huge majorities on either side of the aisle in favor for whatever Netanyahu wants. Benjamin Netanyahu came to Congress and was treated like a conquering hero over the summer. Many of your colleagues, Democratic colleagues, stood and applauded for him when he spoke to Congress. The role of AIPAC and lobbying and special interests, does that disillusion a lot of people? Is that what you're hearing as well?
I think it does because it's a lot of money, but I would just point out that despite the fact that they had a couple of high-profile wins with my colleagues, Cori Bush and Jamal Bowman, they also have had a lot of losses. Now they're putting the fear of you know, everything into these candidates. And you know, Mehdi, that they even put $7.5 million into taking out my sister, who was running solely because she was my sister. And that $7.5 million in opposition ads in 19 days is the kind of money that AIPAC can put in so quickly to bring down a candidate. So yes, people are afraid of that. But I will say that we have big money in everything. Look, there's crypto, there's big corporations. It is a huge issue we have to fight as a party, and we're working to try and do that. And that is not going to stop by having Republicans in there. Republicans, Donald Trump is bringing all these people down to kiss his ring and making all kinds of promises to them. So for us, if we want to get money out of politics, that starts with a Democratic majority and a Democratic.
I also hear people say we need to teach AIPAC a lesson. And AIPAC, of course, these days, as you know better than me, is very much a Republican Party front group. It's no longer the bipartisan organization.
Absolutely.
It once was. Roland Kruger asked Congresswoman, how disheartening is it for progressives such as yourself, you're the chair of the House Progressive Caucus, to fight for a Democratic Party which doesn't give your candidate support? Cori Bush, Jamal Bowman, you just mentioned. He mentions Jessica Cisneros, who ran against Henry Cuellar twice in Texas. Do you feel that you don't have the support of the leadership of your party?
Well, I think it depends. I think we're growing a building movement, you know, a growing movement. We have been able to, whether you think they've been opposing us all along or not, we have been able to bring more and more real progressives into the Democratic Party, more diversity, more lived experience. We have a Palestinian American woman. She is on the floor and she is constantly telling people what her lived experience is. It matters. If you don't think that
but she's also, Congresswoman, to be fair, attacked by a lot of your own Democratic colleagues.
Of course, and so am I. Yes, and so am I. But that doesn't mean, I think courage is speaking up even when you know it may not be successful in the moment, but you are building the narrative and you are forcing people to face what is in front of them. And I think we have been able to do that despite the fact that progressives are never the most beloved of the Democratic establishment. You know that, Mehdi. I know that. We're always being criticized, but
Yes.
having our voice inside and having more of us do that. We had the first vote with over 60 Democratic members saying they didn't want to send more money to Israel this
Yes.
year. That was an incredible vote. I know people may not see it as such, but
It was.
we've never had anything like that,
I
right?
was
Over
stunned,
100 people.
Congresswoman, when I saw
Yes.
Nancy Pelosi sign on to a letter saying no more offensive weapons to Netanyahu. I never thought I'd live to see a day when Nancy Pelosi was saying condition aid. Although Abdullah Zinni is more skeptical. He asks you, he says, you're saying we should trust that Harris is going to go back on her repeated insistence that she has no plans to change America's stance on Gaza. And Congressman, you'll remember back in August, she met with a couple of uncommitted organizers in a rope line. And they said, can we come talk to you about arms embargo? And she said, yes. And then her national security advisor, Phil Gordon, went out on Twitter and said, to be clear, she does not support an arms embargo, no change in policy. They keep saying no change in policy. But people like yourself are saying, no, 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 when she's president, she will change.
No, no, no. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is absolutely do not trust. This is not about trusting that she will change her position. This is about forcing her to change her position, putting her in office because she is going to be somebody that we will be able to push. Now, it's going to require a lot. I don't want to, diminish this. It's going to require us building a bigger voice, a bigger movement, taking on those special interests. But Mehdi, things that were seen as impossible before have gotten done. And I'll go back in history, the Voting Rights Act, ending slavery, all those things did not seem possible until people made them possible.
So on that note,
don't trust, but let's organize.
Emil Pfaff asks, what is the plan if Harris is successful? And Emil says, I'm not voting for Trump. I plan to vote Harris. But what is the plan if Harris is successful versus what is the plan for progressives if Trump is not? Can you lay out for us what you'll carry on organizing, right, for Gaza? You'll carry on doing your pressure. But how different will it look under a President Harris versus a President Trump in Congress? Just briefly.
Well, it'll look completely different because under Donald Trump, we will all be fighting for our own survival. This man will be absolutely unhinged. And the easiest way to divide people is to threaten each group, take away voting rights from Black Americans, take away, do mass deportations of immigrants, denaturalize existing citizens, which he tried to do the first time, or actually he did do the first time around, set up a whole unit. He's also talking about, I don't know if you saw the New York Times article the other day, attacking all legal immigration. So people who are even here with legal status, ending that. And so every step of the way, Donald Trump will make it so we are fighting for our own survival and we are reacting to him. There will be no proactive things. And on this issue, he will give Netanyahu a blank check. He will probably appoint David Friedman again as one of his top advisors. And that will continue. But also, we will have all of our rights stripped away from us here, and he'll be untethered. So that's all we'll be fighting for, is reacting and fighting for ourselves, which will actually make it easier to divide us.
And under Harris, Teresa Clatty, just to continue the question, asks, what changes, for example, at the State Department do you anticipate? Will we have a clearing of house? Teresa asks, are we going to get rid of Blinken, who's been disingenuous on Israel? I hope so, personally.
I personally hope so as well. And I've also made that clear myself that we need to have a big changing of the State Department. I think this has been flawed policy, flawed advisors. And I think she needs to be clear that she's going to do something different. But I think with Harris, the first thing we should do if we win, we look at the Democratic majorities in the House and the Senate. We try to figure out what is our best path to getting victory. Who do we need to have in that circle? How do we bring in some of the civil rights leaders, some of the pastors in the South, who she is going to be listening to just because of the nature of her relationship to the African-American community? And then what are the other pieces within Congress and outside that we need to do. We develop a strategy, and we continue to build on that strategy.
So
but we'll
on that
also
note,
be moving other progressive policies, by the way, on economics and things
so
around.
we've got some great questions on that. Before I get to that, just a broader question. Mohammed Ragab, I hope I'm not butchering your last name, says he unenthusiastically voted for Harris yesterday, mostly for the reasons mentioned here, he says. But he asks, what does Harris look like ideologically and politically? Can you share with the audience where she stands on this issue, do you think, deep down? Because Congresswoman, there's been a lot of speculation about, as a Black woman, as the child of immigrants, as the daughter of an Indian immigrant, as someone who has a niece, Mina Harris, who's been very pro-Palestinian, as someone who has a stepdaughter who's been very critical of Israel but is Jewish, as someone who has a husband who's very pro-Israel and Jewish. Like, where do you think she stands on this?
Well, I can only speak from the conversations I've had with her, and I've had a lot of direct ones, including one that was 45 minutes long, just a week before she became the nominee, believe it or not. Such a strange, bizarre, scenario. Nobody knew she was going to be the nominee. I can tell you she is deeply moved and empathetic in a way that I never saw with Joe Biden. And I've had a lot of conversations with the president on this particular issue as well, one-on-one. So I do think that her natural instinct is not one of a guy who had a 50-year relationship as the foreign, relations chair of the committee with Netanyahu. She does not have that. That's why I remember, Mehdi, she did not attend that speech that Netanyahu gave before Congress. It was sort of a big deal. It was right when she first became the nominee. And so I think that if you just kind of think about her separate from all the political influences, which you can't really do, but just her herself, I think she is far more aligned with, for example, where Barack Obama was. She believes, I do think when she says that she wants self-determination and freedom for the Palestinian people, she believes that. I don't think she's just saying that. I actually think she's...
the problem is not whether she believes it, the problem is she going to use US leverage to get it done.
That is going to require us pushing her. I mean, I don't,
yes.
because she's now going to be president. She's going to, I don't like it when she says we're going to have the toughest, most lethal military force in the world.
Awful.
I mean, she's trying to, and I'm just going to say, as a woman of color myself, we always have to work 50 times as hard to convince people that we are capable, that we will be tough, and that we are empathetic, right? All at once.
I mean, some of this is campaigning, is what you're saying. Let me put a couple of related questions. You mentioned other topics other than Gaza. We will come back to Gaza in a moment, but I noticed Mehdi Esmidi, my namesake, says, as a congresswoman and spokesman for your party, do you have a seat at Kamala Harris's table that will allow you to raise concerns not just on Gaza, but on education, student loans, economic reform, labor, small business? And Rebecca Lowe adds, are progressive issues such as Medicare for all off the table?
Absolutely, I will have a seat at the table, and I have already. I mean, I've been in close, as I said, I've spoken directly with her one-on-one. It's a little bit different than when Biden came in, because we had a much longer campaign to kind of determine what that structure looks like. And this time she's been putting together a coalition that, to be frank, sometimes worries me because of all the different people that are at the table. So what kind of a seat will that be? I don't know. We're going to have to work at that. I've never been scared of like pushing myself in and making it clear. And she's going to need our votes. Look, at the end of the day, she's going to need progressive votes on things. So if she's smart, and I think she is, she will do what the president did and make sure that we get prominent seat at the table and that they're working with us on those economic issues. We've got to make that true on foreign policy as well. I don't feel like progressives have had a strong hand at the foreign policy table. So we're just going to have to keep pushing on that. In terms of Medicare for all, look, I don't think we're going to have Medicare for all as a vote on the table, but I just did an amazing, we're going to continue through our Medicare for all coalition, and we're actually going to stand up a campaign on the campaign side to continue to educate people about what Medicare for all is. We just did a poll in swing states on Medicare for all through my Medicare for all PAC. And it's kind of stunning. It is so popular, but the attacks from private insurance companies and all the big corporations that are benefiting from the system really do bring down the numbers substantially. And it's because people don't know exactly what it is. They like the idea of universal healthcare that's not tied to employers, all of those things, but they don't exactly know what it is. So I think our next step will be, number one, make sure we don't privatize Medicare with those Medicare disadvantage plans. We're going to continue to push on that. We've had success with that. But number two, start to build the education about what Medicare for All is. Is Medicare for All actually even the right name for it? People might go crazy if I say something
I wrote
like
a piece
that.
on that several years ago. Do we need better
Right.
messaging on this subject?
Correct.
Nujat Noor says, apologies if I mispronounce your name. And guys, we have less than 5 minutes left on this call. There's a lot of you in here, a lot of questions. I'm trying to get through as many as we can. What are your thoughts, Nujat Noor asks, Congresswoman, what are your thoughts about voting for a third party and not Trump or Harris?
Yeah, look, I think that the third party candidates right now are not trying to actually build any infrastructure that builds sustained power. I think Working Families Party is trying to do that state by state. But my view is I wish we had a multi-party democracy. We don't right now. And if we want to build one, we actually have to put the time into it. Jill Stein and other third party candidates have said that their only strategy is punish Kamala Harris and Democrats, and then they will pay attention to us. That has never worked. That's not how it works. First of all, because we will be, fighting Donald Trump if he gets elected, things will be so much worse. But also, Democrats have not had a history of saying, oh, this group of people didn't vote for us. Let me now go and ask them what they want. That is not how it's worked.
I'm glad you said that. A lot of people keep telling me if we do this, then they'll take us seriously. That's not really the history. I think you as a progressive know that after 2016, people didn't say, well, we should have been nicer to Bernie. They actually blamed Bernie for losing to Trump. No one wants to be scapegoated. Steve Babb asks, are you concerned, Congresswoman, that thanks in part to AIPAC, but not only because of AIPAC, the House Democratic Caucus is becoming more conservative, more pro-corporate, more pro-Israel over time? And why is Hakeem Jeffries, your leader in the House, so terrible on this issue?
Well, I think he's got a long history with this issue. I can't completely understand it, but I do think now he has understood he has to win the votes of all of the House Democratic Caucus. And so to be speaker, and I do think there's a difference between how he was at the very beginning. You may know I got quite upset when House leadership put out a statement essentially condemning me. And we have done a lot of work in the year, and I'm quite close to Hakeem because we served on judiciary together. I do think he's smart enough politically to understand he's got a big group in his caucus that feels very strongly about this issue. He can't just do what he needs to do in his own district. He's got to represent the entire caucus. So, I'm hopeful that we can continue to move that. By the way, I don't think our caucus has become more pro-corporate. If you look at price gouging, if you look at antitrust, we've actually moved big steps in taking on corporate power in a way that wouldn't have been conceivable even a couple of years ago.
And what I say to progressives is pre-October the 7th, Biden had a very admirable record on domestic economic policy. It's October 7th that basically reminded us that he has some very awful instincts as well, reactionary 1990s, 80s instincts, as you've raised. Interestingly, I just want to, well, there's a good question. I'm going to raise this one. Weldon Nisley, as we're running out of time, let's give you a softball. Weldon Nisley says, thank you, Congresswoman, for your leadership in the progressive movement. Would you accept an appointment as Secretary of State under a President Harris administration? I'm from Seattle. I've always supported you.
Let's win on Tuesday, which means getting every single vote out. And then let's see what the next round brings. But we definitely need a good Secretary of State that understands that we have lost so much of our reputation because of this war in Gaza. And the world is looking at us horrified that the United States would be so diminished and that it could look like Netanyahu's just rolling over us every step of the way. So I intend to make sure we get somebody who is going to lift us back up and start to apply U.S. leverage in all the ways that we can.
And quick last question from our subscribers, and I've got one of my own. Mary Divitt says, and I've heard this a lot, I live in a swing state. Despite the remonstrations from my friends and family, I cannot bring myself to vote for Harris and genocide. I'm considering swapping my vote through the campaign Swap Your Vote. What do you know about that effort? Do you approve of it?
I love this idea. I love the swap the vote idea. I wish we had launched it like 2 months ago so that it could have been an organized thing. And basically what this means is Mary can say to a vote, if she's in a swing state, she commits that she will vote for Harris, but somebody else in a blue state like Washington State or anywhere else for whom it doesn't matter commits that they will vote however Mary would have wanted to vote. So if that's for Jill Stein, if that's sitting it out, whatever, on that line. It's a great way to
I
recognize.
mean, I'm intrigued to hear you say this is a great idea. Won't you get in trouble with your party for saying you're okay with people not voting Democratic?
Oh, listen, I'm elected by my constituents. I got 80% of the vote in the primary, despite the fact that AIPAC tried to take me out. And I intend to continue to do what makes me look at myself, able to look at myself in the morning and at night, because at the end of the day, man, that's all we've got. So
well said, well said. Last question from me. I think it's an important one. You mentioned in passing just now that your own party at one point tried to criticize you, censure you, put out a statement under false, bogus claims of anti-Semitism. You went on CNN right at the start of this conflict, and Dana Bash tried to shame you as some kind of, somebody who didn't care about sexual violence in the Middle East, even though Dana Bash was the one who turned out to be wrong, claiming that Israelis don't sexually assault Palestinians. We now have abundant evidence that they do. We've seen this happen to Rashida Tlaib. We've seen this happen to multiple members of Congress. Just explain to our subscribers, our viewers, a point I like to make, which is we all want to carry on this struggle. And right now there are efforts to demonize, delegitimize those of us who speak for Palestinian rights. I experienced this on CNN last week very closely.
Terrific.
And this idea that if you speak for Palestinians, you are pro-Hamas, you are anti-Semitic, you are a bigot. What happens under a Trump presidency, or even not a Trump, a Republican Congress? Because there have been efforts to legalize this idea, to put it into law, that anti-Israel criticism, anti-Zionism, is anti-Semitism. What happens in 2025 on that front?
We will lose every single legislation. We will have laws that undermine free speech, that jail and imprison some of us who are speaking out. We will have on college campuses, there will be, even worse. I know it's been bad already, but even worse military efforts to shut down protests. I mean, this is a guy who wants to be dictator on day one, and he believes in Netanyahu. He believes in people only speaking out if they're praising him, and anything else will be attacked with, frankly, violence as well, I think, because you've seen that around the country, and you've seen what happened on January 6th. And Mehdi, I just want to end with this. I was trapped in the gallery on January 6th, as you might remember. I was one of the few members of Congress who was not able to get off the floor. They took everyone else off. They left a few of us that were in the gallery.
I remember the pictures.
Because they couldn't get to us. And I still, to this day, remember, that banging on the doors as the insurrectionists were pounding and yelling that they were going to kill us and hang Mike Pence and kill Nancy Pelosi. And I think it wasn't until that moment that I realized myself how fragile our democracy is, that there's this myth that somehow we're the oldest democracy, we've survived all these years, we'll still survive. It only survives when people actually go out and recognize that it could fail and vote for the candidate that may not be perfect. Perfection is rarely on the ballot, but if ever, but vote for the candidate who at least believes that there should be a democracy, that people should be able to disagree, that I should be able to call out my president and say, I don't agree with you. That is exactly what we want it to be able to do in a democracy. And for those of us who are pro-peace, who want to end this war, who believe the US needs different policy towards Israel, we will need the biggest movement we can put together. And that's why I really hope everyone will vote for Kamala Harris and understand that we are working towards building sustained power. A vote in any other direction helps to put Donald Trump in office.
Unless they're doing the swap your vote, as you just pointed out.
Unless you're doing swap your vote, which I love. I love swap your vote. Do it.
Congresswoman, thank you for taking time out from your very busy schedule, day before the election, to take questions from Zeteo subscribers on a very important issue that people feel very passionately, understandably about. Thank you to you all at home for watching, joining us on a Monday lunchtime here in the Eastern time zone, wherever you are in the world. Thank you. I think almost a couple of hundred of you on the chat. We're going to send this out to 300,000 subscribers around the world. We're going to send this to 500,000 followers on YouTube. I appreciate your support making Zeteo what it is within 6 months, but we need more paid subscribers to become self-sustaining and have more conversations like this one. So please tell your friends, tell your family, tell your colleagues to sign up to Zeteo.com as a subscriber. Thank you for watching, Congressman. Thank you for your time, Congresswoman. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mehdi.
Did you like this video? Don't forget to subscribe to this YouTube channel and turn on notifications. For exclusive content and to support our independent, unfiltered journalism, head over to Zeteo.com. Your support matters.